We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
Have you followed all the rules for happiness? Have you worked hard? Have you achieved the goals? Have you checked all the boxes? Still felt miserable? Yeah, me too. Hey everyone, it's Boysen. Welcome back to the Mankind Podcast, the show where we are not afraid to challenge the stories we've been handed about what it means to be a man. And today's guest, Stephanie Harrison, is doing just that with the idea of happiness itself. Stephanie is the founder of The New Happy, a movement and now a best-selling book that flips the script on what we've been taught happiness is supposed to look like. In her words, we've been sold a version of happiness shaped by individualism, capitalism, and domination, and it's making us miserable. In this episode, Stephanie and I will talk about how these old ideas have especially trapped men, isolating us, silencing us, disconnecting us from each other and from ourselves. We'll dig into why your worth has nothing to do with your productivity, how domination culture distorts our relationships, and why real happiness isn't something we earn or chase, it's something we build together. This conversation just blew me away. I listened to the book and I reached out to Stephanie because I had to get her on the show. Her clarity, her warmth, her wisdom offer a powerful roadmap for getting happiness right. And it's a reminder that deep connection, not competition, is our real strength. So if you feel like happiness is just out of reach or like the whole game might be rigged, stick around. This one's for you. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Mankind Podcast. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. It's Boysen Hodgson with the Mankind Podcast, the show where we set out to prove week on week that there is indeed more than one way to be a man. And I think that we've been doing a fantastic job. Today, I am so excited. So I'm with Stephanie Harrison today. So Stephanie, say hello, and then I'll...
Hi, everyone.
So I started running into Stephanie in social media, in Instagram Reels, and you have to go and find them. You have to go and find them and listen, because the presence that she brings and the level of kind of very clear, focused, easy to understand, short form explanations about core concepts in happiness, in goal setting, in emotional management, in relationship, in connection, in all of these things. I was just blown away by how easily digestible the content was. And so I reached out, and at the same time, I downloaded her book called New Happy, The New Happy. So, and I'll tell you a little bit more. Stephanie Harrison is a philosopher of happiness. She's the founder of The New Happy. She is leading a movement to build a happier world. Her book, New Happy, Getting Happiness Right in a World That's Got It Wrong, was released May 14th, 2024 from Penguin Random House and was an instant international bestseller. She speaks at organizations around the world, helping them drive both well-being and performance. Her writing's been featured in the Harvard Business Review, Los Angeles Times, the Wall Street Journal, CNBC, and more. And she has been featured as an expert in over 100 publications. She is part of the Very Well 25, a group of the most esteemed mental health experts creating a better world. How does it feel to hear your bio read to you?
It's so uncomfortable.
Yes. So let's just start right off into, the territory of your book, New Happy. So what is it that we are getting wrong about happiness in the culture that we're living in?
Yeah, so essentially, I argue that we have this idea of happiness that's been shaped by the forces of individualism, capitalism, and domination, and that they have affected our pursuit of happiness in all of these ways that we're not conscious of as individuals. And not only are these pursuits making us really unhappy despite all of our efforts, but they're also creating all of these bigger problems in our world. And so I call this old happy. And the point of the book is to help you, one, understand how it's harming you, and two, help you to move through it and hopefully out of it into a new paradigm.
And where did your kind of drive into what is happiness? How do I find happiness? What are we doing wrong? What can I do better about happiness?
It really
How
came
did
from
you
my own,
start this path?
yeah,
Yeah.
it was really, my own struggles, my own difficulties with finding happiness. And at the same time, I was really deeply concerned with the problems that we were facing in our world and wondering why it felt like we weren't able to do anything to really meaningfully make the world better in any way. And I kept thinking, like maybe there's a solution is that would address both of those things, that would help us to consider how our individual pursuit of well-being might be also affecting other people around us, our relationships, our communities, and the broader world. But at the end of the day, it really came from my own desire to figure out, like, why am I not happy? What's getting in the way of my well-being, and how can I address that and fix it?
Individualism, capitalism, and domination. So let's start with individualism, just
Mm.
as kind of an overview of what what society tells us versus what the research tells us about being happy.
So, our individualistic culture, at its core, it tells us a lot of different things about who we are as people, but ultimately it construes the self as separate from everyone else and everything around us. And so this can sound a little bit esoteric, right? So, what I mean by this is that I am my own person who is, at the end of the day, should be deeply unaffected by essentially anything that's not happening to me or inside of me. And so you can think about this like the kind of rugged individualism of, a lot of researchers trace it to like the frontier culture of America, this idea of consistently moving forward under your own steam, of pushing things forward by yourself. We can see this in sort of the dominant idea of pull yourself up by your bootstraps in American culture and society, the idea that you have to make it on your own. And also, it's connected to the idea of the meritocracy, right? This idea that you will rise based on your own merits without ever talking about the systems and the institutions that make that either easier or harder for you to do that, and all of the ways that that manifests. But ultimately, at the end of the day, individualism wants you to think that your happiness is dependent upon you and you alone. No one else matters. It's just about you and what you do for yourself.
And here we are on the Mankind podcast, where we break down kind of ideas about masculinity and traditional roles and stereotypes and all of that, right? So as I listen to you speak, it's like, there it is. That's pretty much what I was told from the time that I was a little walking, talking boy
Yeah.
about what I needed to be.
It's especially painful. I think the individualism side of the old happy equation really targets men in so many ways, because also that idea of you have to do this all your own is much more heavily socialized in boys and in young men compared to women, who are taught you can lean on your friends, you can have close female relationships, you can cry when you feel sad, and you can express your emotions in those ways. Men aren't given any sort of blueprint for how to navigate that that ability to overcome that self-centered, self-contained version of themselves. And of course, better than anybody, the work you do is all about helping to break free of that and to realize just how connected we really are, and that those connections are not a weakness or a flaw. They're actually our greatest strength.
So, yes, those connections are our greatest strength. So, in leaning into breaking away from the old happy ideas of individualism, what are some things that you put forward as, instead of holding on to this belief, start leaning in toward this?
I think it's really helpful to actually pay attention to the ways in which this is already a myth. I think in some ways it makes it a little bit easier to start to break it. And so when you start and really think about all that you have received from other people or from the world around you, all of the ways in which you have been influenced by them. And then you think about all of the people who you're connected to, not just in your, close family circle, if you have one, or a group of friends or classmates, but in the people in your neighborhood, the people in your community, the people you work with, the people at school. And you start expanding that outward and look to see all of the connections that you have and how they contribute to you. It becomes a little bit easier to go, oh, yeah, this is just kind of a load of garbage that I've swallowed, that I've unfortunately internalized because my parents were a part of old happy culture and they taught it and passed it on to me. And every media is a part of this. And, kind of it all has been devoted to making me swallow what's essentially a level of propaganda. But not a single one of us has ever done anything by ourselves. Not a single one of us gets through the day without interaction and connection with other people. Every single thing that we learn for ourselves or apply in our lives is somebody else's wisdom, somebody else's advice, a piece of research that was done by a group of scientists, right? Like you can start to expand it outward and really draw attention to the fact that you were never alone. You just were made to feel that way because it benefited the systems that this is all built upon.
Woohoo. Yes. And I'm going to save capitalism for the last one because I believe that this individualism and domination, when we talk about kind of mental attitudes that men are programmed into, right? When I started to try and break away from this individualism into, oh my gosh, I'm going to create deep, intimate relationships with men. Like, right? Counterculture. I am going to have guys that I go to that have seen me cry and that have seen me break and that have seen me be angry and that have, so that I am not bringing all of my emotional kind of labor into my marriage or into my relationships with my kids. Like I have a place to go to do that. And something that I notice and I continue to notice in the work is that there is an urge in male kind of culture to squash that stuff as quickly and as hard as possible. And this to me goes into this domination kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you see that? And what did you start finding in your research when you were digging into domination?
Yeah. Domination. I often say, like, we'll get to capitalism, but like the capitalism I'm talking about really and the individualism, those have been something that have really surged over like the last 60, 70 years or so in the form that I'm talking about. Domination has been a part of our culture forever in different forms.
Yes.
And when I talk about domination, there's, I think, what you talked about, which is so insightful, is like the domination of the self as this sort of like shutting down of anything that is not deemed to be appropriate or aligned with the values of the culture that you live in. And so sadness being unacceptable gets shut down. Intimate relationships with men, leaning on them, relationships, mutuality, shut it down, right? Like it's this continual level of suppression. And then it's also about the subjugation of other individuals or groups in order to feel like you are superior to them. And ultimately, this is sort of the core crux of how we are taught in our culture to believe that we're worthy as individuals. It's through how we perform being better than other people. So if you are taught, which we all are from like the beginning of our lives, that your self-worth is based upon winning, succeeding, being better than the people next to you, then you inherently have this framework of I'm always in competition with other people. And this can take much more subtle forms, of course, in terms of feeling like those emotions of, oh, I'm behind in life and I have to keep up with the Joneses, or I have to win and make sure people see me in a certain way, or come up with a brand for myself, or whatever, these kinds of things. And then it goes, of course, all the way through to the morally reprehensible versions of this, including things like racism and the ways in which we, cast other groups of people as beneath us. And when I was looking into the research, like there's just so many examples of how cultures of, for example, white supremacy have shaped the ways in which we have found our sense of self-worth and our belief that we're valuable. It's not in who we are inherently, it's in how we hurt other people and oppress them. And so ultimately, I think that this shift from I often think of it as like domination being like I'm on top of you to I'm next to you and we're in this together, which of course also is supportive of the individualism shift of connection. That to me feels like at the crux of so much of the work that you and your fellow champions of a different type of masculinity are working on, is helping people to unwind that sense of domination within them.
Yeah. And any advice for, I love that you went to that kind of internal drive first, right? Because I was taught, so I have all these voices in my head to shut that down, even before external pressures start kind of forcing. So advice for listeners on how to start facing those voices when that kind of stuff comes up.
I think it's about two things. I think it's about having compassion for yourself, for that version of you that was taught those things and has behaved in the ways that were guided by that, right? Like recognizing how painful that is and the deleterious effects of that sort of conditioning on your well-being, and like learning to sort of sit with that pain and really honor it and take the time you need. And then it's also compassion from others. And I think that those are sort of um, the ways that we find our our freedom from that sense of superiority, is getting in touch with the pain that we all share, and then looking around and being like, wow, like I am not alone in this. Other people are going through it. We can help each other through it, and we can honor the pain that we have, which might take different forms and have different contours, but at the end of the day, it's all pain. And that recognition and that acceptance and love that we meet it with from both ourselves and from other people, I think is the pathway for us to learn how to transcend it.
Thank you. You're really good at this. I just want to say.
Thank you. That's so nice of you.
Yeah. Succinct and clear responses to things as you go along. Something that I love in the book is the playfulness with which you introduce ideas about talking back to the voices in our old heads. And it aligns with some of the other kind of frameworks, like self-compassion frameworks, or mindfulness kind of patterning. So, oh, there's that old happy voice again. Oh, there's that old happy voice again. There's that message that I've been taking on. So if I were to just experience that, name it, be able to sit with it for a moment, soothe myself and walk through it, what would the new happy ask of me? Right.
I love the way you describe that. And I think in so many ways, like, I think I really think that at the core, like new happy, these ideas that I'm talking about the pursuit of happiness, like these are innate and natural to us when we clear away the brush, when we just clear away all the kind of gunk we've consumed over time, and we can let ourselves be our authentic selves and really emerge into that space. And so for me, so much of it is, I think you described this really well already. It's like just continually coming back to the practice of doing the work and knowing that there isn't necessarily an end date where we're done with this stuff. We can just keep going, keep clearing the path and the next step in front of us. And for me, the practice of naming things has been really helpful, not only for drawing my attention to it, but also allowing me to separate myself from it, to remember that that's not who I really am, because the real version of me wouldn't believe those things. I'm clearing the path for who I really am.
Nice. Thank you. I just heard something, and I'm going to be remiss because I'm not going to know who the creator was. But I'll go out and find her and include it in the show notes. So there is a creator whose stuff has just started popping up talking about mental health. And one of the frames that she offers is mental health is not something to be protected or walled off or like shied away from. Like the act of clearing the path, as you were just saying, right? That's work. Like mental health is something that we flex and we push against and we work, because the goal is like a greater ability, greater resilience, greater sustainability in ourselves to be able to handle more. Not that we create a world that doesn't bump up against us, but that we're big enough to bump up against the world in really effective ways and keep growing through it. I love that.
I love that too.
Frame.
Wow.
And now, okay, so we have to face it. Let's face capitalism together. Here we are in 2025 in the late stage capitalist nightmare. Yes, everything's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Gosh, where to begin? I mean, with kind of the lens on men, I'm super curious to hear your thoughts on this, but so much of speaking of self-worth, right? Like so much of the construction of male self-esteem has been found to be in one's ability to be, quote, like a provider, or to be able to win or succeed in the capitalist system. And I think that in so many ways, this construct of how it shows up, I think, goes so much deeper than that, because capitalism isn't just about bringing home enough money to like care for your family or whatever it is. It's also about the endless treadmill of more and more and more that literally never ends. And it's easy to look at examples in our culture of people who have taken this to the extreme, and yet no matter what they have, no matter what they achieve, no matter how many magazine covers they are, they're never satisfied. Nothing is ever enough for them. And ultimately, these sort of capitalist strivings that we have are pulling us further and further away from our true selves, which do want to grow. They do want to set goals. They do want to expand, but in the way that you just described, in a way where we're being authentic to who we are, and we're getting the chance to show up and to grow in those meaningful ways. And I see so many, so many people who are so caught up in this idea that their work defines who they are, that they have to continue achieving in order to prove that they're worthy. And again, I just really think that this is something that is particularly pervasive in every element of our culture that has gone interrogated, because you're like not allowed to criticize capitalism.
Right. And it's so difficult to so speaking particularly from the lens of masculinity, right? I was taught, and generations of men have been taught, that our value is in what we can produce and extract from the world in order to be providers. Like, and this idea of providing has often been directly tied to what we extract from the earth, what we extract from each other, what we extract from the economy, in order to protect this little bubble of people who we think are worthy of being protected, which is usually those people closest to us, right? And the more intense kind of competitive stuff has gotten in the culture, the more difficult it is for men to we can't survive in this economy all by ourselves. The vast majority of us, right? Men and women, the vast majority of us can't make it on our own. But there's still messages out there all the time showing us, telling us that we should be able to do that. And I think that leaves a lot of men without a sense of meaning in the world. which is going to segue beautifully into this idea of meaning and purpose that you speak to so well in New Happy about being fundamental. So let's talk about meaning, purpose, sense of who I am.
I think you just described it so beautifully. Like, we have a need to feel meaning and purpose in our lives. It is profound and it drives so much of what we do. And if you were told that your purpose in life is to be a provider and to succeed in a capitalist economy, and then that is no longer available to you for various reasons, all of which are beyond your control and are systemic in nature, then in those moments, there are sort of two options that are kind of presented to you. Like, one, you can lash out and try to find your meaning and purpose through those other old happy pathways, through dominating other people, through in all of the different forms that can take, through kind of sheltering yourself and cloistering yourself off from the world and kind of abandoning all of your connections to other people, through doubling down, through cultivating like aggrieved entitlement, and thinking about all of the ways in which you need to kind of get back at those people who might be taking your roles or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Or you can make the courageous choice of examining that question, that what brings my life meaning and purpose, and potentially finding a new pathway, something that doesn't hurt other people and doesn't hurt you either. Because I think at the end of the day, like, what we always miss is the fact that being antisocial is pretty much the worst thing we can do for our own selves and our own well-being. Being disconnected and being harmful towards others, it has a tremendously negative impact upon our physical health, our mental health, our sense of meaning and purpose, obviously all these other downstream factors. And so I think what you're doing is, how do we help men to pause in that moment of something is broken, something has dissolved for me, I'm experiencing a lot of pain, and how do we help them take a step forward in a more productive direction that moves towards real purpose and meaning, which is always found in helping other people, in doing good by them. It's not in aggrandizing the self, despite what old happy culture wants us to believe.
Yeah, thank you. And there's a sense of, so I need to make sure that I'm right. Is the debunk of not debunk, but is the reframing of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is that from New Happy? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. I listen to so many books all the time.
Yes.
Let's talk about Maslow for a moment, shall we? Because it seems like
Yes.
that connects, right? Like, most of us are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I certainly got that education, and maybe even in high school started hearing about this. What did we miss?
Okay, so Maslow has this pyramid, right, that you're talking about, the idea that we have these needs and you have to start at the bottom and work your way up. And so if you've never seen it, just imagine a pyramid divided into 5 levels. And at the bottom are your physical survival needs, essentially, like enough food, water, shelter, etc. And then you move up to different levels. And at the very top, like the skinny little tiny triangle at the top, is self-actualization, like becoming your best self. And so this is sort of one of those memes that's really taken as fact, and a lot of people will throw it around and use it as evidence for certain things that they do or whatnot. But Maslow, one, never put that into a pyramid. This is based on his writing. He wrote a book, and then later a bunch of management consultants put it into this triangle framework. It also doesn't include the 6th need, which is the need for self-transcendence, to go beyond the self. And so the thing about Maslow's pyramid is it really emphasizes and articulates that individualistic way of thinking, right? It's like me, 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 me. What do I need? What do I need? What do I need? And how am I going to get it? But what Maslow said in his writing was that in order for us to fulfill our needs, we have to rely upon other people and we have to help other people. And that's how we transcend ourselves. he also said that there's no way to self-actualize without self-transcending. So much of what we see and like so much of the content in the like manosphere and the podcast bros and all of this kind of stuff is like this idea of becoming your best self. And at no point do these people mention anything related to other people. It's all about what you want, how much money you're going to make, the car you're going to buy, the house you're going to have, anything that's about you and all the things that you want and need. And there's no way to be your best self without being of service to other people. And so ultimately, what we have forgotten is essentially the fact that we are deeply, inextricably connected to other people, that they're the ones fulfilling our needs, and that we have a responsibility to other people to also help fulfill their needs. And I think for me personally, this is like the heart of New Happy. It's the secret, in my opinion, for us shifting away from old happy culture and building a world where everybody can be happy.
Yes, here, may it be so. So you kind of said this in so many words, but something else that I really enjoy about the book is that you quote from a broad variety of folks. You are pulling research in from, super old, super historical stuff, all the old literature and the new literature, which is to say, is any of this like new?
No.
Right?
That's the irony. No, I don't think so. I think that everyone is always circling around these questions, right? Like every generation of humans is always trying to figure out the answer to these questions of how do we live a good life and what does that involve? What does that look like? And I think for me, because I consumed such a vast amount of information when I was working through this philosophy, I realized just that there's the same things just kept coming up again and again. Like no matter where I looked, whether it was like the time of the Greek philosophers and Aristotle, or whether it was Confucianism, or whether it was looking into Buddhism, or whether it was looking at modern science, or what poets in the 18th century said, like it's all the same stuff basically. And that to me felt like I'm coming at this from a psychology background, so the research is very helpful, and I think it's really important to help people to build bridges to take on new ideas. And also, there's a very powerful form of proof when you realize that human beings in that quest to circle this question have come to the same answer pretty much every time, and it just isn't in the public consciousness in the way it needs to be. And so ultimately, because happiness is like so deeply a part of our programming and our conditioning, if we don't make these things known, we're going to keep making the same mistakes until we start to really deeply internalize what's getting in the way of this and how we can address it.
What's up, everyone? Now, here on the Mankind Podcast, I talk a lot about building physical health, emotional resilience, but lately, I've been thinking more about mental wealth. Those daily deposits that keep my mind clear, calm, and creative. And honestly, one of the easiest shifts I've made has been adding Magic Mind into my mornings. Magic Mind is a mental performance shot that helps me kick off the day with intention, without the spike, and without the crash. It's packed with clean, natural nootropics and adaptogens like lion's mane and ashwagandha, the stuff that's been backed by science and used for centuries. Now, what I've noticed first was focus, but what kept me coming back was how even my energy has felt all day. So if you want to get your hands on this stuff and give it a shot, head to magicmind.com and use the code MANKINDMAY. That's MANKINDMAY for 20% off your first order. Links will be in the show notes. You got to get your hands on this stuff. You will not regret it.
Let's talk about cheap dopamine. I don't know if you follow the transition there.
I love it.
But yes. So, right, because what gets in the way of us actually internalizing these kinds of things? So I think that this is an opportunity for you to say, like, here's 4 things that you can start doing, or here's how many things that you can start doing to start, deprioritizing cheap dopamine and prioritizing, good serotonin.
I love it. I think the first thing to do is to find one or two friends. And that might sound really basic, but the research shows that most people only say they have one friend, and that's only like 50% of the population. And it's particularly bad, of course, with men who are most affected by the loneliness epidemic. And so finding a couple friends who you spend time with on a regular basis, ideally in person, that sometimes can't be done, I understand. So virtual totally works then too.
Yeah.
But time when you're actually meaningfully connecting in some way. And that could be like, it could be playing video games together. It could be chatting about a show that you like to watch. You don't have to delve too deep right away into the, waters of intimacy, but you have to start somewhere. You have to start with building these connections and these relationships. And then the second step there is to start escalating the parameters of your relationship in a healthy way. And so what I mean by that is relationships are built through acts of giving and receiving. So every single one of our relationships, when you look at it, you'll see that it starts with like a small ask that the other person answered and said, yeah, I can do that for you. And then when they did it, it brought you a little bit closer and closer you get through this exchange of mutuality until you become best friends or family members or partners or whatever it is. And the way for you to build and strengthen your relationships is to ask for help with stuff and offer help when you're asked. And so in this group of friends, can you start by saying like, hey, I've got to hang a poster on the wall this weekend. Maybe you would normally do that by yourself. You'd figure out how to do it and you'd like hold it up awkwardly and you'd suffer through it. What if you didn't do that? What if you asked somebody for help with it and asked them to come over and support you? And then bit by bit, you start to build those asks into bigger ones and ask for more emotional support if that's difficult, more physical support, anything that you need in order to really strengthen that depth of relationship. And then the third thing I would do would be stop chasing extrinsic goals about how rich, successful, powerful, beloved, whatever you can be, and instead start chasing intrinsic goals. And chasing is the wrong word because you don't really chase them. You pursue them deliberately and authentically. And the way to do this is to start by asking yourself, like, what do I care about? What excites me? What matters most to me? What changes would I like to see in the world? And then what's one step I can take to help to make that happen?
Thank you. Excellent. Excellent. So I want to tell a story just because it popped up as you were talking about friends at the beginning of that. Recently, because of another conversation on the podcast, I've started doing a walk and talk with guys here in my little town in Springfield, Massachusetts, where I'm just putting it out there on Nextdoor, like, hey, I'm just going to be getting together at this place at this time to take a walk. Not heavy duty conversations. We're not going to do politics. We're not going to do religion. We're not going to do debating. Come and take a walk with some other guys and see if there's a connection, right? That first bid, like putting that bid out. And a partner reached out to me, not the man, but his partner reached out to me and said, I would really love it if my husband would do this. And he he does it. And my husband says that adults don't have friends.
Oh.
And there it is, right? It's like it's gotten it's so intense out there that, that feeling of the only way to be safe is to just be completely cut off from other people.
And this is like a big problem in even circles where people prioritize their mental health, in my opinion. Like,
say more.
Unfortunately, what I see a lot of online content perpetuating is a pursuit of isolation in the guise of mental health. And I think that people have been really misled to thinking, again, it comes down to this individualistic framework, thinking my mental health is about what I do for myself and myself alone, not thinking about the relational elements, the systemic ones, the community, the structures that make it possible for us to survive and commute to work every day, and like a million other things. And I think that in many ways, when we are afraid or when we're struggling, our instinct is already to isolate ourselves, right? Like it's already to sort of pull back and say, this is how I'm going to be safe through this. And there might be moments in our lives, particularly after recovering from, tremendous trauma, big difficulties in life, massive transitions, where we might need to temporarily step back from relationships or communities that we're a part of in order to like do really deep work on ourselves. But that should not be the norm, in my opinion, because that's not how we're going to heal. It's definitely not how we're going to get free from these systems. And this idea that people have that other people are not trustworthy, that they're just like a bunch of walking red flags out there who are trying to hurt me, that everybody's a narcissist who's out to get me. Like all of this stuff is really going to only make us want to retreat even further from the thing that we need most right now.
Which is
connection.
There we are, which is connection. Yes. And because I know it's in your book and because we're both familiar with it, let's just bring the Harvard Grant and Gluck study out into the room to say again that in an 80-year study, the longest longitudinal study of men ever conducted, at the end of the day, the thing that they found that gave these men longer, happier, more satisfying lives is
relationships.
Connection. Yeah, this piece. Being connected to one another in relationship. So, Stephanie, what do you have happening right now? I know there's something on your website. I'd love you to share it just to get listeners engaged more with your content and what you're doing in the world.
Yeah, you can find everything at thenewhappy.com. There's tons of resources. Everything's available for free. And hopefully you'll be able to find some tools and tips that will support you in your well-being.
Stephanie Harrison, I am so grateful that you took the time to speak with me today. I'm going to hold it up on the frame to make sure that we get it in. It's The New Happy by Stephanie Harrison. Go get it on Audible or go buy the book and learn more. And thank you for doing the work that you're doing in the world.
Thank you.
I am grateful.
I'm grateful for you and for the work you and your communities are doing. So thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor.
Come back next week. Hear more from the Mankind Podcast.
This has been the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. And of course, I want to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you make it a heck of a lot easier for us to let men out there in the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. And if you've been enjoying the music throughout this episode and all of our episodes, check out Jim, Donovan, and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. Now, the fee for this episode is simple. If you found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, remember that life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us, so long as we rip the pen out of fate's hand and become the author of our own story. So my friend, pick up the pen and we'll see you next week. Lots of love.
Hey, it's Boysen. On the Mankind Podcast, we've brought some incredible guests on to talk about the importance of doing the work to improve our mental and emotional health. And here's the truth. Multiple times over the last 25 years, I've had the help of one-on-one work with some amazing therapists. For me, for my wife, for both of us as adoptive parents, and for our kids. The Mankind Project and Men's Group, though awesome, are not a substitute for professional mental health support. And so I'm thrilled that the Mankind Podcast now has BetterHelp as a sponsor for the show. BetterHelp works online. It asks you what you're working on and then matches you for live one-on-one sessions with a licensed therapist. someone trained to work with you, listen, and offer helpful insights. I'm using BetterHelp. It's super easy, and I like what I'm getting. If getting one-on-one support in the comfort of your own space feels like a good direction for you, I invite you to check it out. Go to the link in the show notes or betterhelp.com/mankind. And if you sign up, you'll get 10% off your first month of therapy.